Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the January 13th edition of Beyond the Headlines. Thank you so very much for joining us, whether you're tuned in to GBN Television, GBN Radio, or any of our social media platforms. My name is Colin Dowe, and I'll be facilitating the conversation this evening. And we are doing some reflecting and projecting in terms of what we can anticipate for law year 2025. And I am pleased to have with me three eminent attorneys. And welcome, lady and gentlemen, Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, Casey, Aisha McLean, and Jerry Edwin. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines, and Happy New Year to each of you.
And to you too.
Happy New Year.
Yes, thank you, Colin, and Happy New Year to you and all listeners and viewers.
All right. I wish everyone good health first, and then everything else after. Yes. All right. Let's just get right into it. And Aisha, if I may, let me start off with you. When we hear Law Year, we hear Law Week, we think of the Grenada Bar Association, and I understand that the Law Year, by way of its theme, addresses accessibility and awareness, and just how the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court can bridge that gap through community empowerment or engagement. We will get to that. But tell us a little bit about the Grenada Bar Association. When was it formed, and what really is its mission?
Okay, Colin, thank you for having me again. So the Grenada Bar Association essentially was formed in around the 1990s, mid-1990s. It was formed from the Grenada Lawyers Association of Lawyers previously into the Grenada Bar Association. Essentially, our mission is to come together as attorneys at law to better our community and also to assist each other in terms of practicing and going forward. So the Grenada Bar Association is a segment of the general OECS Bar Association. So as you would know, the OECS consists of several other islands, Antigua and Barbuda, for example, St. Kitts and Nevis, and we all come together as one to, engage the community, for example, and to assist lawyers throughout the region.
So it is both community-based by way of service, yes, as well as the support of each other as an institution.
Certainly.
Okay. What is the membership like in Grenada? And I guess by way of asking, how many attorneys are there practicing and are members of
Colin,
the GBA?
It would be remiss of me to actually put that off at the top of my head. I would want to say, Mr. Ferguson, said about, let's say...
It's over probably 130, it's in that region.
Okay.
130?
Yeah, it's about 130. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
How, let's deal with the internal first. So how has the Grenada Bar Association been serving its members? What are some of the activities that that the GBA does?
Well, what I would like to start off with is our flagship program, which is Grenada Bar Association Law Week. That is a very popular event that we have. Last year, it was during the month of November, and one of the main events that we do have is the Pro Bono Legal Aid Day. I don't know if you ever heard of it, Colin, but trust me, last year I had the opportunity to sit in on some legal aid and pro bono activities, and what happened, we invited a lot of people from the public to come in and literally get free legal advice. This initiative was supported by a lot of senior attorneys who you may not normally get to see and just ask a question, but they were there present. We had over 50, over 50 people who came out and they were able to receive legal advice. Casey was there. I think Mr. Edwin, you passed by as well, and we were able to serve the community in that way. We also had other activities such as a moot for the TAMCC students, which was great. We had Justice Ralston Glasgow presiding over, and that gave the students the opportunity to see what it was like to actually practice. They were given their fact pattern weeks before, and they had to go into offices of attorneys, and they practiced. They taught them how courtroom etiquette. They taught them how to speak, how to address the court, and that was a lovely exercise. So essentially, we focus a lot on Law Week, but generally, the Grenada Bar Association also has a lot more initiatives, such as the Peace Initiative, which we'll get into a little later.
Okay, and maybe you can address it now, but Ruggles, if I can, what are some of the advocacy initiatives that the GBA would typically put on?
Well, in terms of advocacy, the GBA as an entity, in fact, going as far back as 1998, for example, just taken actions, especially constitutional actions. In more recent times, we have not done that, but there are certain seminal judgments, for example, Holdip and the DPP, brought by the Bar Association back in 1998-1999, dealing with the independence of the office of DPP, independence of appointment, and how you terminate what you can and cannot do in relation to the termination of the Director of Public Prosecutions. So there is at the court level, but at the community level, just to take up from what Aisha started with, the Grenada Bar Association actually as an organization has probably the most organized public advocacy in terms of public education. Actually, starting in 2001, what many of bar associations are just getting into, like Law Week, was started by the Grenada Bar back in 2001 as an institutional activity spanning the last 23 years. The Sir Archibald Ned Memorial Lecture, part of the flagship activities, is one designed for the public. It's not for lawyers. Lawyers attend, but it's designed for the public and to take up issues that touch and concern the public, that the public would be concerned about, that affects the public. The last one, for example, focused on the issue of climate change. We have done many dealing with constitutional rights, human rights issues, and we have had several of the top speakers. In fact, it's the premier Bar Association lecture probably in the Caribbean, because we bring in the best in the respective areas, whatever the topic. We have had former prime ministers. We have had, for example, Lloyd Barnett, who is considered one of the leading constitutional lawyers in the region. Dana Sitahal from Trinidad, who was assassinated in 2014. But she was one of the leading criminal practitioners in the region. We have had from every single Caribbean country, Ghana, Belize, Trinidad, Jamaica, we bring in the best for the Archibald Ned Memorial Lecture. We also have done, and probably we did more organized, structured public education in the past. We have our advocates, many of our advocates who may just appear individually, educating, informing, sensitizing the public on different issues. But essentially, what we try to do through public education is to take topical, current issues that touch and concern the public and address them as part of our public education exercise. And I'm always pleased to say that this Archibald Ned Memorial Lectures, for example, those, it is the longest running lecture series in the entire Commonwealth by any bar association. So part of community engagement, we engage on matters that touch and concern the public.
Are you happy with the public attendance at these lectures? As you said, lawyers attend. It's not for lawyers because the topics go beyond. Are you happy with the public attendance, and is the vision of this Archibald Lecture Series, Archibald Ned Lecture Series, being realized?
Sure. Well, one of the, we started off at Norton's Hall, basically in town, and we moved to the Trade Center, sold mainly at the Trade Center, and now it's live, it's broadcast live, so it's there, and it's for posterity. Okay. So whether you come to the lecture tonight or not, it's not lost. You can tune in at any time. But let me just give you the example, and maybe that reflects it. There were 4 individuals in Grenada, just ordinary members of the public who have attended, we did our 20th lecture this year, at least a minimum of 16 lectures. Right. One who comes from Satés every single year. I think he missed out this year. One from St. Paul's, in fact, Brian Lindsay, attends the lectures every year. I think probably he missed one or two. And you have Jonathan Francis. I remembered several years ago, probably 2017, his daughter got up in the audience and asked a question. That's Jonathan's daughter, and she was cheered. Why? Because small, short, attending TAMCC, a TAMCC student, everybody thought she was brave enough to ask the first question. Today she's a lawyer, right? An attorney at law, and in fact very active in the Bar Association. Okay. So that's the kind of impact. And just to make this final point, Aisha alluded to it, the moot involving TAMCC, the moot every year as part of Law Week, several of our lawyers emerge from the moot competition. In fact, you can check, probably there are over 15 or 20 lawyers who participated in the moots while at TAMCC, who are lawyers today.
In terms of service to your membership, do you actively encourage continuous legal education? I know in the medical fraternity there are CMEs that one has to keep in touch with their particular discipline. Is that something that you actively encourage?
I think since 2001, again, the two probably major platforms of the Bar Association, public legal education and continuing legal education. And as a matter of fact, and we're talking about voluntary continuing legal education, and what happens now is that you have a general legal counsel that where, for example, lawyers have to get their professional license to practice and renew it yearly, and part of the requirement is continuing legal education programs. Okay. And that, in my view, is absolutely critical.
And is it mandatory?
It's right, it's mandatory. Okay. No. So I'm saying, but even before it was mandatory, Grenada led the way on several programs. In fact, we had, over the COVID period, with the Bar Association, the OECS Bar, and OGBA, the Organization of Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Associations, we hosted many virtual programs, continuing legal education programs.
Is there active encouragement? I know we still have doctors, they specialize, engineers specialize, whether it's civil, in electrical, etc. Nurses specialize, whether it's in midwifery, oncology, etc. Is there an active push for lawyers likewise to specialize in the various disciplines? It means going off and doing master's degrees in different areas. Is that something that we're seeing taking place among attorneys in Grenada?
Yes, but we have a more general practice approach, but we have lawyers who, for example, specialize in succession, inheritance, property law, conveyances. We have a lot of that because that's where, in fact, the money comes from.
At least you said it. I was tempted to say it, but you said it.
Okay. Yes.
And, so there's always this joke in here, sign a land paper and that's it.
Well, I don't think it's as simple as that, but you have much specialization. And then you have, for example, and Jerry probably will deal more with this issue, in the area of criminal law. We definitely need more criminal law practitioners in Grenada, and then you have folks who
and the question is that a specialization, criminal law?
You can. Okay. Some people do exclusively in Jamaica, in Trinidad. You have people who exclusively do criminal law.
And I'm not referring to practice makes perfect, but rather you go off, you study in this particular niche. That's what I'm referring to. And again, if you can give an indication as to what proportion, if you know, of the attorneys, 130 close to thereabouts, that would have some level of specialization. Again, I'm not referring to somebody who did something by rote or apprenticeship, but rather went off on intellectual property or right. conveyance or something like that. What proportion of the attorneys have done that type of thing?
Well, the thing is, you have specialization. Mm-hmm. You have attorneys who have pursued certain fields.
Right.
But when they return, they don't practice.
No, I get that. The volume is it.
Yes.
So I get the idea of specializing, but the volume of work would not be there. So you do general practice, but you are the specialist in X. So should a case or come up, then we know we go to Ruggles or we go to Jerry for this. So, and hence I'm asking if you have an idea as to what proportion of your membership would have gone off and done this type of specialization.
I don't think it's a significant proportion. You have, for example, people who have done marine law, as you mentioned, intellectual property.
Right.
We have arbitration, mediation. In fact, just recently we had 2 attorneys returning. One did arbitration, mediation, and another did employment law.
Right.
So you have that, but in the market here, in the market, whatever you do, ultimately it comes back to the areas of practice, popular practice. You have land law, you have civil law, you might have family law, you have criminal law, you have constitutional law. And though we may have many lawyers, again, as I say, we have many lawyers, but we have a significant shortage of lawyers in certain areas of the law that's needed as far as practice goes. Okay. One area is criminal law. Jerry, I'm sure, would elaborate more on that. One area, critical area, is constitutional law and human rights law. That's an important developing area, in fact, very critical.
Jerry, you certainly can add that, but I also want you to address what role do you envision for the GBA and attorneys in national development?
Thank you, Colin, and good night to everyone, and I'm pleased to be here with my colleagues. I left my flowers at the door, so forgive me if I am not as optimistic as my good friends are with respect to the role of the GBA in national development. I think that lawyers in other societies, and I first see us here in Grenada, I see we're not arriving here as lawyers. We are arriving here in 2025 after centuries of domination by Europeans, then independence after long struggles, and then we are now standing on our own 2 feet trying to make our world. And as doctors, lawyers, in the professions generally, we've managed to be outstanding. In terms of national development, I think that the lawyer, I could see in a previous era where, for example, it was important, maybe in the suffrage movement of the in 1951, I imagine when voting rights were critical. I imagine too at a time in 1979 when issues of equality and rights even to go out and openly cast a vote or to meet these issues were incredible in terms of the state imposing unconstitutional rights, I should say, Ruggles, to ban public meetings, for example, and to ban persons from participating in public life. I think today that the lawyers are not, with some exception, are not concerned about national development. I think that Mr. Ferguson is probably the only lawyer here in Grenada that I know of, or maybe Dr. Alexis is the other, who've been engaged in public life, in the life of the people, the life of the nation, putting forward issues, for example, of constitutional change, changing our courts. We have 130 lawyers in Grenada, for example, Colin. 6 of those lawyers, 5 plus 1, 6 are in the High Court in criminal practice. Nobody wants to take on those issues. Ruggles pointed out constitutional rights, human rights law, intertwined into the criminal law, where the Constitution clearly, the right, for example, to a lawyer, the right to remain silent, the right of fairness, implicated in the criminal law, very much a part of the constitutional law. I think that lawyers generally, at least from what I have observed here, with some exception, few exception, are not interested in national development. I think they're interested in personal development. No wonder that we see so few lawyers engaged actively in making life better for everyone. I'll give you an example. For the last 8 years, Grenada has not had a law library. Where does the person go, for example? You're a brilliant man, Colin. You have a simple issue. Who said you need a lawyer? You can go to a law library, sit down, read, acquaint yourself with the issues, and represent yourself. Not in Grenada, we don't have that library. We also do not have a pro bono desk. Again, for people like yourself who are intelligent, understand the society in which they live, figure this matter, I'm not dealing with a complex matter, I simply want to handle this case myself. We do not have a pro bono desk where a person can represent themselves before the court, because there's nothing saying that you need to get a lawyer to assert your rights. Missing. It's not here. We have, I can go on about the issues in the courts.
What's the role, for example, of legal aid and counseling, as you mentioned, the pro bono?
Legal aid and counseling is limited to matrimonial matters or child support, family issues, and I think they play, Jasmine Redhead heads that organization, and she has been doing a tremendous, I don't know how she does it, but the vulnerable members of our community, women, single women, battered women, children, that's the role of legal aid. Legal aid does not play a role in the criminal courts, except in murder matters. So
do you believe that the GBA should play a critical role in revamping our legislation, for example? I mean, I know case law quite often drives the laws that we see on the books, but some of the things on the books have been on the books for quite some time, and termites probably take a lot of it. The question is whether the legal fraternity should take lead on bringing up to date some of these things.
Well, Ruggles pointed out that earlier in the Holdip case, when it has to do with the constitutional rights of appointment and so on. But the GBA 25 years ago, 27 years ago, was actively doing that. I had a suggestion when I first came here that the GBA could, for example, have committees that would be responsible for reviewing the law. I remember discussing it with Ruggles, but then he was no longer the president. Someone else came in, and that took a back seat. I think it is critical. We have laws in Grenada, for example, that says it's illegal to beat a drum 50 feet from a courthouse. Illegal. We have a law that says you can't practice Obia. That's a short name for African religions. 50 feet from a courthouse. In 1859, they were flogging men. Just, what, Ruggles, 2 months ago, we had that law overturned. not GBA initiatives, but again, I point to Ruggles Ferguson as someone who in the forefront of these struggles. So I don't see the bar. I think the bar has to find its legs. There's a bar association spokesperson here who can speak well for the bar. I prefer to see the thing as it really is, that the lawyers here, in my opinion, have shunned the heavy lifting of changing the society and developing that society.
Okay.
I don't see it.
Aisha, what does accessibility and awareness entail, which is the theme of 2025?
Colin, before we go too far, I would just like to remind Jerry that by virtue of him actually just being an attorney, he is also a member of this Grenada Bar Association. So just a reminder that of my colleague that he's also here. So the accessibility essentially, one second for me, Colin. Let me just pull up the thing. Yes. So essentially the theme for the law year 2025, as pronounced by the Chief Justice, essentially we are focusing on allowing persons generally to have access to justice. Jerry just made a very important point, which is something that we normally shy away from. In the criminal field or the criminal area, a lot of persons are not getting access to justice as they should, simply because maybe they cannot afford an attorney, or even so the attorneys who are available at the criminal bar are not able to take on the load of cases. Right. In those circumstances at this moment, Colin, I think that the court has recognized that there are deficiencies in this area, and certainly we're trying to bridge the gap so that we can allow persons to come to the courts and be able to access justice as easy as 1, 2, 3.
So the idea is what, having a pool of attorneys that are available? I mean, how would that access come about?
Well, I think what would make sense in the grand scheme of things would be to have attorneys. So the training would actually start from the law school. What happens, and I'm a young attorney as well, just 5 years called to the bar. I do practice criminal law, but mostly at the magistrate court level, and now I'm going to take on some high court matters with my colleague, Mr. Edwin. Right. However, what happens is that attorneys are not particularly encouraged to pursue criminal law. Sometimes you come and it's a big scary thing. Advocacy is a big scary thing. So I think it starts with education. It starts from law school, it starts from that area, and then from there you go. There are lots of seniors in the Grenada Bar Association, like Mr. Edwin, who takes on the bulk of criminal matters. I know Mr. Ferguson is not necessarily a criminal attorney, but these attorneys are present to guide the younger attorneys and to encourage them. So I think once it is that we fix that issue, coming from education and going up, we should be able to have attorneys who are more attracted to the field of criminal law, and therefore the turnout for the public will be there. So you won't always hear Jerry, you won't always hear Peter. You're going to start hearing Aisha, you're going to start hearing Sharice, you're going to start hearing more names, but it just really comes with time.
Okay. And would you say, Ruggles, that there is a history of community engagement? And I'm not talking about lecture now, when you ask the community to come to you, but rather you going out to the community, probably akin to the pro bono session where you said there were about 50 people last year. But are there other examples of you proactively getting into community in order to share whether people's rights are, or just give advice, etc.?
Yes, I think, and part of the Law Week activities is exactly that, but the focus is usually on schools.
Okay.
So it has not been a focus that much in the last few years. But when Law Week started off, part and parcel of it was to visit schools, to expose and engage students.
Let me ask you this.
In various aspects of the law.
Is visiting schools just a checkbox? I mean, if I am a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, I'm in Form 2, I'm in Form 3, and a bunch of lawyers come and talk, right? Yeah, you're talking, I get away from class, which is different from getting into, let's say, a community center in Mount Morris and engaging on themes that may be peculiar to that area. Might be land issues, might be areas in terms of violence, might be drugs, or whatever it is. Isn't that more a proactive approach approach in engaging the community and serving the community, as opposed to what I would probably say check a box, because we have to do a community engagement, captive audiences in school because they can't run away. So we talk to them and box is checked.
Yes. But let me say I don't agree with you at all, because what we do not have, in fact, is sufficient sustained engagement with schools. It really starts in schools. Primary schools, secondary schools, and I'm talking about not just going and talk, but engaging students on the law. You know, how to keep out, for example, of the criminal justice system as an accused. How to understand the law and your civic duty, how to be exposed, for example, at an early age with issues of the Constitution. These are not things students are historically engaged in. Right. And in fact, as part of the Law Week activities, GBA has visited every secondary school in Grenada, Carriacou. Every secondary school, different years. As I said, the program has shifted a bit from the schools, and again, bringing students to the schools. Because you see, again, we have, we tend to condemn young people, students who may not be exposed to guidance, the kind of guidance that we ourselves may have had at an early age. And it is important to get that captive audience. In fact, I will say that we need to do more of it, and not just us, but other NGO organizations, because we see the statistics. Lots of accused persons come into court now, students in secondary schools accused of violent crimes. So it's important, but at the same time, I agree with you, and part of what I discussed with the president of the bar, because we had an initiative, it was really in 2014, to do now, apart from the national Archibald Ned Memorial Lectures. There were 3 community lectures. It actually started in 2014. It has not been continued, but they were successful. We had the public lectures named after prime ministers, but community forums. So, for example, there was the Herbert Blaze Public Education Forum in Carriacou. That was a massive success, because that was done when the Possessory Titles Act was a bill and coming into fruition, and you had about 5 or 6 lawyers who went up from the mainland, and we had a great session in Carriacou, because you know Carriacou, the issue is land. Right. We had also the Ben Jones Public Education Forum at the Baines Hall in Grenville, and that was on a constitutional topic. Again, it was a great turnout, much engagement. And Jerry, if you recall, we had the Morris Bishop Public Education Forum in St. Paul's, together with the St. Paul's group at the St. Paul's Community Center, and that was basically then CCJ versus Privy Council. It was the hot topic then. And I only recently spoke to the president, because you need that kind of engagement where people can express views and you can have informed discussion and guidance. So I'm agreeing with you, but that must not be at the expense of abandoning students.
Okay, understood. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our first break, so we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll be dealing with the judicial system in Grenada, an appraisal by our attorneys. We'll be right back.
So it begins, a journey like none other. Every moment has the potential to be unforgettable. Bring home a piece of the tropical green forest with every emerald. Capture the sparkling light of flawless water in a diamond. Make the sunrise and sunsets last forever. With precious colored gemstones, the essence of happiness is in our most precious memories. So, when it all comes to an end, bring home something that will last forever. Colombian Emeralds International. Bring home more than a memory.
Unlocking opportunities, Excel leads the way in digital advancement every single day. Fair internet access for all to share. Transparent billing with consumer care. Excel 3EC bill safeguarding our rights. Net neutrality, consumer protection shining bright. Mobile number portability available to you. Switch providers seamlessly. Keep the number true. Excel 3EC bill promoting fair play in the digital world. Every single day, affordable services are important for all. Through the EC bill, there'll be progress overall. Excel and the NTRCs connecting our communities.
Excel and the NTRCs digitally transforming our space together.
Grenadians, the National Celebrations Committee invites you to celebrate the next 50, embracing a future of development, transformation, and unity as we ready ourselves to mark the Grenadians' 51st anniversary of independence. On February 7th, 2025, activities include the Independence Monarch Competition semifinals, January 25th at Lassaget's playing field, with the final carded for Saturday, February 1st at the Sutters Bus Terminal. National Church Service, February 2nd, 3 p.m., Crossroad RC Church. February 6th, National Colors Day, Interministerial Competition and Independence Cultural Extravaganza from 7 p.m. at the Grenfell Bus Terminal. And on Friday, 7th, it's the grand finale at the Kiriani James Athletic Stadium, the Independence Day Rally, Military Parade, and Made in Grenada Expo. Let's all celebrate in true Grenadian unity, the anniversary of our 51st independence.
Grenada is such a beautiful country.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners, and we're reflecting on the lower year 2025. Ruggles, let me just come back to you. And has there been any improvement with accessing information with the registry? I know we have had problems, whether it's land records, etc. Digitization was a thrust. Where are we with that? And just accessibility, really.
Yes. The registry continues to be a sore point. It has been a sore point for a while. Hopefully, we'll see some improvement this year. And part of the issue with the justice system, including the administration arm, really you start off with physical resources. Because, for example, you had the Supreme Court registry on Church Street. Mm-hmm. For years, from the 1960s, the same physical space that occupies 100-fold matters, registration of documents, etc. Coupled with that, we have the issue of human resources. Limited staff, staff that have received no specialized training for the issues. In fact, one of the problems with the registry is that in order to get promotion, like when you are a specialist in the registry, you get promoted out. If you have to move out, you get promoted out of the registry.
Because these are public officers.
These are public officers.
Okay.
Right? So that has been a problem.
So you have clerks in the registry, and if you do anything, then you have to move out.
Right. If you do well, then
out you go.
Right? It's part of the promotions process. You have, again, really inadequate staff at the specialized level, registrar, deputy registrars, and so. Though I heard the good news last week that we now have an additional deputy registrar, and they will by February there should be a second deputy registrar. So you will actually have a registrar and 3 deputies.
Is this one of filling the organizational chart and hence more resources being put in by government, or is it that the attorneys make more money outside and hence there's no interest in public service like working in the registry?
Well, I suppose that can be an issue, but I think the bigger issue is really the stress of the job, especially when you are operating with limited resources. And it's something that needs to be addressed. Physical infrastructure, technology, though there has been improvement in that area, and human resources.
Okay.
And we have had a serious problem over the years with our conveyancing.
Right.
Deeds, people purchasing land, selling land. Now, I must say that Grenada, the first and foremost, and you know, the unfortunate thing is that staff get blamed for it, you know, because people take out their frustrations on the staff, or people may take out their frustrations on lawyers, on the system in general, and understandably so, because the starting point, when you're dealing with land in Grenada, the starting point is Grenada operates an old, archaic system. In fact, a system that only the last 2 standing members of that system, you call the unregistered system of land conveyancing, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Grenada. All other countries in the Caribbean have moved to what is called the registered system of conveyancing, and possibly the Commonwealth. I say region, but I believe the entire Commonwealth. So for example, when you're purchasing land, what's supposed to be, and to a layperson should be, a simple exercise becomes an extremely complicated exercise, because under our unregistered system, you have to go back in your searches over 60 years. So you buying land, the person you buying land from, you have to go back 60 years to ensure that the title to that land is good title. Right. So you have to go back to what you call a root of title, 60 years before, and then you search forward to ensure that the chain is not broken.
Right.
If when you're going forward, you find something happened in the 1970s, a deed was conveyed, and 5 people should sign, but only 4 sign, you have to correct that, because it's a defect in title. The person who was supposed to sign may be dead and have 10 children, right? Then, and all of them have an interest in that share. So first and foremost, to deal with land in Grenada, and I'm really surprised, as I made the comment up to last week, for those who specialize in that area, and allow that to continue over the years. I mean, it's a serious indictment. Right. Because right now you can't even guarantee title, proper title, because the records are in shambles, not now, but for years. So we need to move to a new system, which is a registered system of conveyancing. It is simple. We don't have to search back all these years. It depends on what you call a certificate of registration for that piece of land, and that represents what is called indefeasible title, guaranteed by the state for the land. So you just have to go to that single document, and all encumbrances, when you say whatever judgments affecting that land, mortgages, would be on that single document. Very simple, very simple. And only today I was speaking to somebody who worked out outside of Grenada and dealt with the registered system and conveyance and said, listen, I can't come back here and practice in the unregistered system. So the system has to change. You need human resources, you need technological resources, you need physical infrastructure. It's a work in progress, but if we do not address this problem, it will have serious adverse effects on the economy.
Okay. Aisha, the civil cases. We hear conversations about backlog, delays in getting judgments, access to the appellate court. Are those some of the real challenges that are being faced as we look at the civil courts?
I would like to piggyback off of Casey's point. The real challenge behind of this is human resources as well, because at the end of the day, we do have attorneys who are accessing the courts on behalf of people in the civil arena, but at the end of it, we do also have, I think it's 3 civil judges, if I'm correct, 2. Justice Acti and Justice Glasgow. These are 2 civil judges. The reality of the situation is all of the civil matters go to these 2 singular judges. Right. Now, we have to be fair. They're two individuals, they're people. We all come before them. It is a matter of managing the system, and where we are now, that's all we have, and we have to work with those resources. I would, though, commend the judges for their efforts, because they have been trying. The legal system has been trying. The OECS Bar Association has been trying. I know that we have appointed a few judicial research officers who assist judges in terms of writing judgments or doing research for judgments. So these are the resources that we have behind the judges to assist in access to justice.
Speaking of resources for judges, I mean, is there taking of notes and evidence electronic yet, or do you have to wait on the judge to handwrite as witnesses are giving evidence?
Let me jump in here.
Yes.
The system is broken. Yes? The system is broken, and there's no will on behalf of those who control resources to fix it. The irony is, in this government, lawyers at the top. In the last government, lawyers. The previous government, lawyers. No will to change. And I don't understand it. Directly to your question. This marks 10 years that I'm back home in Grenada. I came in from voluntary exile and have never been happier. The magistrate. I remember I came here and I saw the magistrate during a proceeding, Colin, writing, and I was sitting in the back then. I wonder why isn't she paying attention? Why is she writing? I came to understand that the technology in the magistrate's court 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 75 years ago is the same technology available today. I was speaking to the chief magistrate and I said, I hope I get an opportunity that I can say this to not the powers that be, the Minister of Legal Affairs. Madam Minister, we have a case where there is not a single stenographer in our courts. The magistrate's court is delayed because Her Honor, and all the magistrates are female in Grenada, all 5, Her Honor has to have a pen, a ballpoint pen, and a notebook. And like a primary school student, she has to write everything that is said. Now, Colin, CBI made how many hundreds of millions of dollars last year? Is there any money for the courts? Let's talk about the registry. What's the real problem with the registry? They're not paying the staff. The staff is grossly underpaid. The court staff in Victoria a couple of months ago had no air conditioning, yet they had to sit there, endure the heat in order to perform their work. These people are doing the best they can. There is no will at the top, whether it's for the library, whether it's for the air conditioning, whether it's for a proper courthouse. We are the stepchild. the legal system, that is, of those people that control the resources here in Grenada. Look, it got so bad. The Australians a few years ago gave Grenada, I think it was $140 million, $90 million, something like that, to build the halls of justice. What did the political class do? They decided, to heck with the courts. And they built themselves the beautiful edifice that we see up on Mount Welldale now. No court. You can go into the High Court now, and there are seats. The seating is for 4 people, Ruggles? 4 members of the public, maybe. The AC works when it feels like. It is moody. The chairs on which we sit, I remember Justice Innocent, the other High Court judge, he sat in one of the chairs where the lawyers have to sit and go through their trials. And he said to us, how are you all doing this? Straight back chairs that will give your back something to think about after you sat on them for a few hours. He said, let's get some good chairs, and we had to borrow chairs so that lawyers can sit and conduct the work for their clients and the work of justice. The fact is, the powers that be, they don't care.
But why is this the case? And as you pointed out, attorneys have been at the helm, whether they serve as PM or not. Attorneys have been at the helm within the political directorate for quite some time.
Yes.
Why hasn't the advocacy come from the political directorate or from the Bar Association speaking to their colleagues who will be returning as colleagues after their political tenure, because that has a shelf life as well? Why hasn't it happened?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm asking myself this. When will Grenada get a simple voice-to-text system to assist the magistrate, to assist the High Court judge? Now, when I do trials, Justice Guilford has to stop me. Mr. Edwin, please slow down. She's making notes.
Right. Is this something part of the regulation, or is there a policy that says you must make notes?
No. I mean, judges always make notes.
Right, yeah.
But one would think that the technology that is present everywhere else in the world would also be present here in Grenada. I was looking at the O.J. Simpson trial from 1995. Last year I was looking at it. Just going back because I was in law school at the time during that trial. And I'm thinking, what's wrong here? And I couldn't put my finger on it until afterwards. Grenada does not have technology in the courts that was available in 1995 in other courts. And I don't know, the cost is not prohibitive. We just had a trial for the first time before Justice Guilford in the last term, where we actually had exhibits that were projected. Hasn't happened before. First time. I hope that's the kind of progress that we are making. But if this is progress, we'll have to wait for the next millennia for the real changes to happen in our courts. I don't think any of us can wait that long.
Ruggles, will we see an expansion, for example, of the High Court to accommodate more people? I know growing up, you two, you'd have gone in the High Court and you sit at the back and you look at cases ongoing. I mean, I think former Justice Lyle St. Paul was with his theatrics, we all witnessed. Would we see that type of thing happening? Would we see the introduction of technology? What type of improvements can we anticipate happening in 2025?
Right. Again, very important question, Colin. And we had the opening of the lawyer on Friday. And one of the things that concerned me, you have the opening of a lawyer, such an important event. It's not an event for lawyers alone. We are only part of the service in the system. But you know, when we are entering the courtroom, the Clico building, even the 2 courtrooms couldn't accommodate all the lawyers.
Okay.
Right? And you ask why such an important activity, at the end of the day, it should be exposed to the public. so that the NGOs, everybody could be invited, because one of the principles is really open justice.
Right.
That unless there are restricted hearings, for example, sexual offenses are restricted hearings, it's open to the public, and therefore it must be open to the public so the public can walk in, as you said. When the court was, number one court was on Church Street, it's big enough, you go sit in the back. Now, many years later, you have a courtroom that can hardly accommodate lawyers, and if that courtroom is full of lawyers, then members of the public can't come in.
So one would be tempted to say we have regressed. I mean, can we still carry on the excuse of Hurricane Ivan of 20 years ago?
Right.
And as Edwin said, why haven't we delivered on the halls of justice? Because that area, Mount Welldale, was supposed to host Parliament building, but also courts.
Yes, and that's where advocacy again comes in, because the Halls of Justice project, it's a project spoken about for the last 15 years. And it has not come to fruition, and it's necessary. Today I was in the magistrate's court, and again it struck me. I was representing a particular individual there, and it struck me again. People come to our court in 2025, and they have to stand up. Or you stand up on the steps, you stand up outside, if it's raining, you have an umbrella. It's hot out there. People either come to court to give evidence, people have taken time off from their work. They might stand out there for 4 hours and the matter is adjourned. We need proper physical infrastructure. We need halls of justice, because at the end of the day, the image that you project, again, is a reflection of you. So, for example, there's the halls of justice in Trinidad, for example, and there you have a courtroom. It has all the facilities, including restaurants, including waiting areas, robing rooms, library, everything. Grenada is a much smaller jurisdiction, and therefore you need to address that physical infrastructure. And when it comes to, I always tell people that, especially in the criminal justice system, when we talk about cells and the conditions of cells in a police station, you know what people feel? Them sell them old criminal and them, that is no big thing. They're going in the cell, so nobody's concerned about it, until they have to go in the cell. Right? The filthy cells. And again, it's not an indictment on the police. Just recently, a few weeks ago, I was down by the station, a particular station, and the police, say, watch, you're supposed to come. You see the desk? Holding up the desk now no leg. And they have some contraption to hold up the desk in the police station. Right? That is, we need to address physical infrastructure.
Would you agree that if you treat someone like a criminal, probably the behavior would be reflective? And similarly, if that's the type of conditions that you face, whether because a witness is an innocent body, it's a witness.
Precisely.
And yet you treat them in such a deplorable manner, why will I want to engage
you have a proper witness room, people can get water, you have bathroom facilities. We cannot, in 2025, continue along those lines. And, well, as I say, the justice system does not really win votes. At the end of the day, it's the direct things that people can see in communities and so. But you need to. And the starting point is really improving your physical facilities. It's unfair to have somebody come into court and standing on the steps, rain falling, you have to jam up to shelter rain, sun, Some people can't take sun for long. But you have to wait because the matter isn't called. So I'm saying, and when we're dealing with the court court system. Remember, we're dealing with different levels. You have magistrates courts throughout the country. People criticize the courts all the time. People quickly criticize the magistrate, quickly criticize the judge. But again, you don't know the conditions under which people operate. Right? And that is a critical aspect of it. But nonetheless, Colin, and I really want to make this point, it is not a story of doom and gloom. I want to make that point. This is a work in progress, and I am fairly familiar and exposed to most certainly probably all the justice systems in the Caribbean and the broader Commonwealth. When you go to sessions, most people have the same problems. And the Eastern Caribbean, among all the minuses there are several pluses that can be proud of. So I really want to make the point, it's not a story of doom and gloom. And for example, the civil litigation that Aisha addressed, Grenada, and the OECS, I think one of the best things injected in the civil system of justice in 2004 mediation. Right? And I'm proud to say that Grenada, I believe, leads in mediation. Most attorneys, the vast majority of them, are willing to engage in matters in mediation, and then plus we have great mediators in Grenada. And so matters coming into the civil justice system is not about getting to a high court judge for trial. Some, maybe 40% might get there. But there is infrastructure now through the process of mediation, not just in Grenada, but in the OECS. And in that regard, we are way above who we can consider the more developed and advanced countries.
Okay, thank you very much. It's time for us to take our second break, so let's take the second break and we'll be right back.
So it begins, a journey like none other. Every moment has the potential to be unforgettable. Bring home a piece of the tropical green forest with every emerald. Capture the sparkling light of flawless water in a diamond. Make the sunrise and sunsets last forever. With precious colored gemstones, the essence of happiness is in our most precious memories. So, when it all comes to an end, bring home something that will last forever. Colombian Emeralds International. Bring home more than a memory.
Unlocking opportunities, Excel leads the way in digital advancement every single day. Fair internet access for all to share. Transparent billing with consumer care. Excel 3EC bill safeguarding our rights. Net neutrality, consumer protection shining bright. Mobile number portability available to you. Switch providers seamlessly. Keep the number true. Excel 3EC bill promoting fair play in the digital world. Every single day, affordable services are important for all. Through the EC bill, there'll be progress overall. Excel and the NTRCs connecting our communities.
Excel and the NTRCs, digitally transforming our space together.
Viewers and listeners, of course, we're speaking about the legal system and reflecting on legal issues 2025. And Aisha, I know you wanted to make a point piggybacking off of what Ruggles was saying.
Oh, yes, certainly, Colin. So during the break, I was thinking about the Grenada Bar Association Peace Initiative. I know this is an initiative started by the Grenada Bar Association along with some private sector members, whereby you could recall last year into the end of the year, we had some issues with gun violence in Grenada, and it suddenly erupted. Although Grenada is normally known as a peaceful place, we had a lot of gun violence, and as a result, we came together with some private sector entities in order to form this committee, and this committee specifically focuses on violence in Grenada. I'm happy to say that since we've created the committee, we've had the opportunity to go to schools, and going to those schools, we've had attorneys at law who are trained in mediation and arbitration to come to the students and to speak to them in relation to how to de-escalate situations. Like I said, Colin, education is very important, and we recognize that it is important, and as a result, we've decided that it's important to start from the small, young age and to go into the schools. Further to that, we have plans to engage with the members of the gangs or the particular entities who are essentially driving this type of negative force into Grenada. So I think it's important for us to just note that in as much as the Grenada Bar Association may not be operating as efficiently as some persons may allude to, we are making an effort to positively contribute.
You talk about guns, so I'm going to do some rapid fire. So brief comments, please. Any position on the constitutionality of the Pension Reform Act? There have been some conversation that might be unconstitutional, at least in terms of the broad strokes. Any comments there?
No, I would say that is not an area of expertise that I have. I'm sure Ruggles has much more experience than both of us combined, Aisha, on this issue. So we'll pass.
Any thoughts there? Constitutionality of the Pension Reform Act?
Well, not of the entirety of the act, but I believe there could be areas subject to challenge.
So someone who is a teacher, for example, who were traditionally defined as being part of the establishment, not getting access to the pension as defined in 1958, that you believe might be open for challenge?
Well, part of it, and I mean that is an entire program. Snap bites on a weighty issue as that may not be the best. But for example, let me just use the example of contract workers. There was a particular case involving an employee who worked in a pensionable position for several years and was terminated, made an application to the court. In fact, it's a Bihari case. Made an application to the court under, there's a section 84(8) of the Constitution that is entitled to pension, basically. So you have that group of workers, the pension, the contract workers, and the court ruled, just to put it in simple terms, because his appointment did not come through the Public Service Commission. A letter from the Public Service Commission basically made a difference because he was in a pensionable position. He had a contract that was renewed for several years, and he was subject to public service rules and regulations. The only distinction is that there was not a letter from the Public Service Commission, and I think that has been viewed as safe haven to deal with contract workers.
Something like this. I mean, if I got that, my temptation would be if you walk like a duck, look like a duck, quack like a duck, is a duck, I'm going to the appeals court.
Well, it's at the appeals court. I'm saying it's not a decision cast in stone, and let's see what the Court of Appeal says.
Let me also ask you this. The formulation as described seems to provide some cover for individuals who will basically retire into poverty because the only thing they will have will be the NIS pension.
Yes.
So let me ask you, leaders of the Grenada Bar Association, seeing that this conversation is going to be opened up, or this ability going to be opened up to private enterprise, will we see law offices enrolling their employees in this retirement savings plan, other than which it will be NIS pension and poverty? The attorney himself or herself will be fine, but the secretary at the desk will not be, because all they would have is NIS. So this retirement savings plan, would you want to see private enterprise, including law offices, make moves to join government in this program?
Well, is it a contributory scheme, by the way?
Yes, it's a contributory scheme.
Yes.
But remember, it's a public sector. It's a public sector pension fund.
It's so the description, as I understand it, government has taken lead, but it's not restricted to public officers.
Right, yes, but it's primarily targeted at public officers.
For the genesis.
No, yes. Now, as I say, that is an entire program, and probably more than one program, and I wouldn't want to do injustice to it, because no doubt there are very beneficial aspects of the Act.
Right.
So it's not that the Act is unconstitutional or could be challenged, the entire Act could be challenged as constitutional. When you're challenging on the constitutional level legislation, it's usually parts and significant parts of legislation. So it can be a section. The issue, and I'm happy with the way you put it. In fact, if it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, because you know, at the end of the day, we have constitutions. We became independent in 1974. We have constitutions, and part of the issue of the public service is that there is a public service commission that stands between the employee and the politician, basically.
Right.
It is meant to protect you, so if a new government comes in, that the government can't fire you, the government can't discipline you, because there's an independent public service commission.
Right.
Now, if you have a situation with contract workers, and the state can circumvent that and say, let's do it, let's just appoint people on contract and renew the contract. So you avoid what the Constitution says should happen. I think there's an issue there, but I do not comment on it because it is correct that the court has ruled, the High Court has ruled, but certainly the Court of Appeal, and ultimately it may go to the highest court, hopefully the CCJ by then, but
no, you hoping for it to take long.
Judicial
if it happens quickly, then it would not be the CCJ but the Privy Council, and those with silk robes would be able to go to represent. But it is my next question, actually. Will joining the CCJ improve the justice system in Grenada?
I was agnostic. Yeah. In fact, I remember that there was a part of the CCJ Act, and I discussed this with Justice Byron, who came into Grenada to convince Grenadians. I thought that, by the way, I thought on both occasions it was a bad idea. Not that we joined the CCJ, but to bring in prime ministers and judges to convince voters that they should support the court. I thought it would have been so much better to bring litigants who had been before the CCJ, have had the experience, like Ms. Myrie, Ruggles, the Jamaican, and Ruggles had a client at the CCJ as well. They can speak to how efficient the court is. You see, change, and I think that is what has held up our system here in Grenada, we are afraid of change.
That's human.
No, I think we've taken it to the extreme here in Grenada. Yes? We are afraid of change, as though there's something more, something is going to strike us down. But the CCJ idea, no, I'm a convert.
Okay.
Because I can tell you, the quality, the eminence, the heft, the intellect of our judges, they're second to none in the world, no doubt. The idea, I think of, I mean, they had a slogan about, I mean, they really were
so you're saying it was the messengers rather than the message that caused the referendum to fail?
I think the messengers were not effective as would ordinary people, like the ordinary voter, him or herself, that could have sold this, rather than these people who don't. You know, I just thought it was a bad idea. Plus, I opposed it on another technical ground. There was a part of the act that said the prime ministers of the region had this power over the chief judge. Yeah, and I thought that politicians, I mean, we can't help it. That's where the money is, to run the courts. But the CCJ has had a trust fund. Why would the political class be involved in the court at all? In fact, that is the success of the CCJ, that it had this trust fund. Ruggles, I think it can go for 20 more years or more on its own budget. This is really tremendous.
We have a caller online, so let's take this caller. Good evening, caller, and welcome.
Hello, good night. Good night.
Go ahead and listen to the telephone and not your radio or television. Yeah. But go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I would like to know what is the lawyer's opinion concerning the new bill that passed in the parliament concerning the civil servants' pension. Now, I have no problem with the government wanting to do something for the pension. I think it is long overdue and it is needed. But seeing that we're hearing some lawyers are saying that it's unconstitutional, part of it is unconstitutional, and we're not hearing anything much from the unions again. So I'd like to know, you all as lawyers, what is your opinion? I think the idea is a good thing to make sure that we settle the pension for government employees. I think it's good to settle it, but it's based on what is being heard by some law.
Thank you very much, caller. I think we addressed that.
Yes, I think it's addressed. Probably, unfortunately, the caller may not have picked it up, but again, you see, just my view quickly on such a fundamental piece of legislation that there ought to have been public education before, because it's so fundamental. Now, what has happened is that it's passed in Parliament, and now it's being discussed in the public. Right? And again, because there are issues, and when people raise issues about it, it's not that they're against the act. Because you can still challenge parts of it that are considered unconstitutional. And it won't be unconstitutional, let me say, because I say it's unconstitutional. The court will ultimately, but I'm saying there is a basis. And I use the example of the Bihari case, because I think the judgment in the Bihari case at the High Court level was used to say, well, the court has said we can go ahead and do that. I want to say every single, to the best of my recollection, there are about 7 or 8 key pension cases in Grenada, starting with Donovan in the 1990s when there was the Retrenchment Act, Richard Duncan, Irvin McQueen. All of these cases were won at the Court of Appeal. Every single one was dismissed at the High Court. Every single one. Probably the only 2 were the last 2, the Hummel and Armstrong, and with the Public Workers Union, the Justice Glasgow judgment. Every other one was dismissed at the High Court.
And went in favor of the plaintiff.
Yes, and went in favor of the plaintiff. So I'm just saying, one, and probably I can just quickly raise the comment here. one, in terms of the public education and discussion, pre the passage of the Act as opposed to post the passage of the Act. And two, what has been done is that Section 47 of the NIS Act has been abolished. I've heard an explanation that is abolished because it was linked to the Pension Disqualification Act that was declared unconstitutional. But when this act, when NIS came into being in 1983, the idea was to expand pensions beyond public servants to include everybody. So that's the first thing. The second point is that there was a cutoff period. There was a cutoff period, April 4th, 1983. Those before receive a 1958 pension, and those after receive an NIS pension. But for public workers, and that's where the issue arose. For the intention in Section 47 of the Act, there was a special section in the NIS Act to create a special public service pension fund. That was never done. That was never done. So when everybody forgot about it, fell asleep on it, and then when people now worked throughout the years in the service and began to retire, it became a live issue.
So the NIS pension was never designed to reduce the take-home, for example, of the public officer, because there was a provision to make them whole.
Section 47, it was never triggered.
Right.
In fact, in the Code of Appeal, I referred to that Section 47 so many times, but they said it was never brought into fruition. So, again, and now the second thing, and that's just an observation, I don't have a conclusive position on it, and have not heard an explanation that really satisfies me, but the NIS, right? So for example, Section 47 could be amended in a way that facilitates this coming into being. NIS has over 40 years of managing pensions. NIS has an infrastructure where you deduct. Government pays, you deduct with public workers. NIS has an investment committee, because that's the idea. They have actuaries, and so. Why is it? Are we taken? Because I think when NIS was initially envisaged, is that let one entity manage pensions. You have all the experts. Now we have a parallel infrastructure just for public workers' pension. You have director, deputy director. In other words, it's like, are we creating a parallel NIS? Because what it means now is that the administrative cost and the experience, because you bring in new people on board. And so why is it, couldn't we, for example, expand the NIS and deal with probably a special division in there? Because you have all the infrastructure already. As I say, I'm not making a conclusive pronouncement, but it's a question that I have raised. But when it was raised with me for the first time, and I don't see the rationale for doing it, because 40 years experience is no easy experience. 40 years, and managing these things are not easy. You're dealing with investments. People knowing what they investment, how you invest these monies to multiply and so. So it's better if you use the experienced people, you have the access to actuaries, you have the infrastructure, you have the staff. It may mean you simply have to just expand what you have. Right? Okay. So that's my comment.
If I can, and Aisha, probably I can bring you in here. The Possessory Titles Act, this always a bee in some people's bonnet. Is it effective? I know what the intent was in terms of providing access to lands, etc., especially if people died without a will, etc. But are we seeing it used according to the spirit of the law as enacted?
In my opinion, yes. Persons are being able to have title to their land, the lands that they have possessed for the period of 12 years in accordance with the Act. However, I know that the next thing would be the judgment of Justice Agnes Acti in the possessory titles matters. And in relation to that particular point, I would piggyback to Justice Ruggles' assistance in that. What are your thoughts in relation to the judgment by Justice Acti in relation to the Possessory Titles Act?
Well, it's a judgment. It's on the appeal, right? It's a judgment on the appeal. But I think in relation to the Possessory Titles Act, it's definitely positive, because the act itself, what the act does is to ensure that people who had never had a title to land and could never correct the title, some really bad titles that may probably had to go back to 1900 and these things. Right, so it corrects that by making people who have been in possession of land over a period of time to be able to get titles.
We have a caller, so let's just take the caller. Good evening, caller. Welcome. Caller, go ahead, please. All right.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, good night. I just calling to ask question is it Grenada really have a constitution? And I want to I listen to Mr. Jerry Edwin where he mentioned that some people in the registry collecting so much a low salary. When I think about the people that work in NIS, the salary is so high, and you have people receiving $180 something, including me, a month from NIS. Even $200 of the most, and you will hear they say that the little you salary when you pay your contribution, it was so low. But I thinking that the low salary, that the low contribution that we pay to NIS, these people and them use this little contribution to perhaps invest. And I feel it's fair that the people that have pay low contribution now, they invest a little contribution, so at least they should get a little more in this day and age of giving somebody $180 something and $200 a month. I find it really fair. I wish somebody could look into this situation and try to raise the little contribution that people pay years ago.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, caller. Again, the theme of retiring into poverty, and lots of people, because the mandatory age was 60, there's some movement with that, but even if you bring it up to 65, if it's $186 a month you're getting, you have to continue working. You have to work until you die.
It comes back to public education, right? In other words, why and how these pension schemes operate. I think, again, once people understand that, and that's why I say in terms of the legislation, and no doubt there are positive aspects of the legislation, but the people who it affects must understand it at the end of the day and feel a part of it, feel ownership of it. So, I mean, the issue of NIS, the issue of salaries, people speak of people's salaries. Grenada among the lowest salaries even at professional levels, and I'm sure that you know about it. The salaries really low. If you want to find out what legal fees are really like, then go in the United Kingdom and these places where it's over the top. So I mean, what the caller just highlighted is the importance of understanding these things, how they operate. So, for example, how can I move from 186 a month if I want to get 500 a month? What is required? Right? Because it might be possible with increased contributions or whatever. But again, a point was made about the investments. You bring in people new on the scene, a new infrastructure that will take a while to develop. you don't know whether these investments will be successful or not. Right? And I'm just raising it in the context of having a specialized pension, something that was set up and dedicated for that. You know, abolish the section which you can use to make it part of the system. And you take it away and developing. I wonder about the wisdom of it. I'm still looking at it. And so I'm not making a decisive point, but I think it's important enough to raise for the purpose of discussion.
All right. We're almost out of time. But as you close, each of you, I know that you're familiar with the Needham's Point Declaration on Criminal Justice Reform. And as you give your closing comments, as you project where the legal system ought to go, 2025 and beyond, if you can just touch on probably some policy interventions, because, you know, we have to deal with things like cybercrime. We have to deal with firearms, the gangs, the deportees. These are all things that we have to deal with. So if you can project where we would want to go, 2025 and beyond, I will certainly appreciate that. Jerry, I will start with you, then I will get to Ruggles. The lady will have the closing word, as they always do.
Yeah. I'm an advocate. I believe that if something does not work, that we write, we complain, we talk, but there comes some point at which we must act. And I think that as a bar association, I mean, I appreciate that things are slow, but I don't want to know about slow at this point. Not in 2025, Colin. I think that the bar can, in fact, push that change. Ruggles always tells me about some time ago when the bar actually took to the streets to bring a particular political party to task because they thought they had all the power. They certainly had all the constitutional power, right? They had all the police power. But the lawyers took to the streets and were able to get the change that was needed so that justice could take its march forward. I don't see that now. I don't know if the elevator was working when you guys went to the for the law day at the opening. Was the elevator working? We've been talking about the elevators now. For months, I saw an old lady with a stroller going up 2 flights of stairs.
You can also juxtapose that how we treat with people with mental illness within.
This is the greatest travesty of all. The most vulnerable class of persons, alongside children, the mentally infirm, being put in prison in the general population. I mean, listen, lawyers, I believe, have to start talking with their feet. Yes? We have to say, no, there won't be any court today unless you fix this elevator. Come on, come on. You can't run a court system with brilliant judges, brilliant lawyers, but the infrastructure itself is in tatters. I don't know. I mean, I've only spent 10 years here, and it's really given me pause as to whether I want to continue in this line of work, because I have never seen so many bright people failing to act to solve problems. I've never seen it. Such a small society. How many workers do we have? Speaking of the pension, how many real earners we have in Grenada? 75% of our population are below 35. How many people really are earning money to sustain a pension system? I mean, the numbers are probably, I bet you it's not more than 15,000 workers. It seemed to me that the brains of Grenada, our experts, do not bring their minds to solve the problems of this very, very small society. We are 0.00006 of the world's population. We are tiny. Our problems are tiny. We do not seem to bring our brightest mind. God knows we've got a lot. We don't seem to bring them to bear to solve the problems. It's just a lot of talking.
Ruggles?
Yes, thanks. Well, you asked about the Needham's Point Declaration, and I'm really happy because just to address it briefly, the Needham's Point Declaration was a declaration in Barbados in an area called Needham's Point at the Hilton in Barbados in October 2023, and that gave the roadmap for criminal justice reform in the region. I've been to countless sessions, and that was a great session, and you know what? It was inspired and driven by the Caribbean Court of Justice. Brought all stakeholders in Barbados in one room, criminal justice stakeholders. TPPs, judges, lawyers, police officers, prisons. Many countries were represented. But I was also present in a different
Interestingly,
capacity.
I recognize politicians were also there. The ministers of national security and Minister of Legal Affairs were also invited.
You had CJs, you had AGs there. No. That body, out of that body, there was discussion over a 2-day period, and there was the conclusion, the summary. In fact, you can Google and see the Needham's Point Declaration, dealing with the police, increasing the capacity, the investigative capacity of the police, rehabilitation in prisons, critical to address delays in the criminal justice system. And there were some aspirational time periods, like indictable offenses, 16 months. You have summary offenses within 6 months and so, right? That every country should work to. It was really great. And there was a follow-up session in Ghana in July. In fact,
question: are we dealing with the Jerry syndrome? Just talk. When are we acting?
But, right, and that's what that was one of the concerns, because I raised the concern, because you always have these meetings and the great things, but there was immediate follow-up. No, there is the roadmap. There's a roadmap set, not by one country, but the minds of the region, the collective minds of the region, identifying different areas. For example, in investigation, forensics, for example. And I remember the Bahamian police commissioner and Jamaican police commissioner were particularly strong on it. To say, listen, every country don't have to set up resources to deal with forensic science and DNA and all these things. Can be a particular country or two can focus on particular areas, and you have these shared resources. We talk about a lack of resources. If we have to build it ourselves in our respective countries, we're not getting there in 100 years. But the collective resources, what was beautiful about that conference is that the recommendations came from the bottom, right? Identifying the problem and identifying the solutions. One of my concerns, though, is you have this document, a great document, and then you hear everybody having separate meetings talking about the same thing.
So we have the roadmap, but we're not getting in the car and drive at all.
Precisely, and even that is a separate topic on its own. But I thought it was a great start, because it created the balance. For example, the constitutional right to a fair trial within a reasonable time, and to address delays in the system, and how you deal with that.
Okay.
No, yes.
So, closing comments, ideas, Aisha, as we project 2025 and beyond.
Well, Colin, again, thank you for having us all on the show this evening. As a representative of the Grenada Bar Association, I think it was important for us to come here today so that the public can see that the bar is in fact alive and active and willing to contribute to national development, contrary to popular belief. we understand and we appreciate that there are issues within the judicial system that needs to be fixed, and we are committed to assisting the powers that be to fix these issues, Colin. We see, after our discussion, we talked about the Needham's Point Declaration, we talked about the Possessory Titles Act, we talked about the Grenada Bar Association Peace Initiative, we talked about educating the society. And Colin, I just want to bring back that one point. That's why it comes down to education. And so I think it's important for programs like these to continue so that people can have access to us in this way. Very candidly, people called in and they raise points. And so this is what the Grenada Bar Association will continue to do. We're happy to attend anytime. We're at your beck and call. So thank you for having us.
Aisha McLean, Jerry Edwin, and also, of course, Ruggles, Ferguson, Casey. Thank you all for being with us this evening and for sharing. And to you, viewers and listeners, for giving up part of your Monday evening as we discuss legal issues projecting through 2025 on this Beyond the Headlines program. My name is Colin Dowe. It's been a pleasure having you, and we look forward to being with you again 6 days, 22 and a half hours from now. Good evening. Take good care.